You know, Team Fortress 2 has a lot of weapons, and I should know because I counted them, there's 12. But the problem with all of these weapons is that not all of them are made very equally. It's like people. Some people are really funny, and then some people say Tf2 sex update every 4 fucking minutes. But one thing that's weird about Team Fortress 2 is that even though there's 49 quintillion weapons in the game, the community continually asks for new ones. Normally you would think that if there's so many different weapons in the game, that everybody's different playstyles would be satiated in some way. And also that eventually you'd reach a point of oversaturation. After all, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. So despite the fact that there's so many different weapons, what is it that exactly inspires people to ask for even more when they talk about updates for Team Fortress 2? Well, it's the simple fact that a lot of Team Fortress 2 weapons kind of fucking suck. Pretty much every class that isn't the demo man has a whole slew of weapons that are either not particularly efficient or just outright bad. Meaning that while Team Fortress 2 does have a lot of weapons, you don't want to use every one of them, which makes it feel like there's really not that many choices at all. There's simply very little reason to equip something like the Liberty Launcher or the Righteous Bison, unless you're just trying to goof around. But there are also a lot of weapons which are neither goofy nor fun. And while I would be the first person to be interested in new weapons, after all, I think there's a lot Valve could do and a lot of cool stuff they could implement, I also think that overall it would be more reasonable and better for the game to just fix up a lot of the weapons that we actually have. First off, reworking old weapons is easier for a similar reward as making a new one. Valve is not spoiled for choice for bad weapons to rework, so it's not like they're really artistically limited in any way if they were going to do so. Additionally, making a new weapon has to come with all the work of making assets, implementing them to the game, stealing something from the workshop and actually having to pay the person who made it. That's a lot of work for the cat who works in the Tf2 offices. Work that you don't have to do if you remake an old weapon. And it's kind of hard to sympathize with Valve on this one. After all, they have absolutely tons, waves upon waves of high quality community content that they can basically just implement for a small contractor's fee or just outright profit sharing. But Team Fortress 2 is also notoriously bad with new implementations of anything. So overall, it is still just easier to rework an old weapon. And also, I just think it's more realistic to think that Valve would rework old weapons rather than adding new ones. But even outside of giving Valve a pass they don't deserve, there are other benefits. First off, reworking bad, irrelevant weapons is better for the overall health of the weapon pool rather than just adding new one. Adding a new weapon adds one new weapon. For all we know, that new weapon could be good, it could be bad, it could be schmedium. It's kind of up in the air, but adding one new weapon just adds one new weapon. For every weapon that you rework, you effectively add a new, more relevant weapon to the meta, while taking one bad, irrelevant one out. For example, the Short Circuit, a weapon that was originally quite bad, but which Valve actually turned into something that is useful and has use cases in the Blue Moon update. Blue Moon. Aside from being very oddly difficult for me to say and a terrible beer, Blue Moon was an update where Valve effectively did exactly what I'm talking about in this video. They took a bunch of weapons that were not necessarily in the best position and changed them overall, in my opinion, for the better. And none of the weapons in the Blue Moon update got quite the same treatment as the Short Circuit did. The Short Circuit was originally just what the Short Circuit's primary fire is now, a weapon that allows you to shoot down rockets that you can aim at for a little bit of metal. Now, overall, this wasn't a very bad weapon. It had use cases, it was just extremely situational. And also, it wasn't necessarily that effective at the job it was trying to do. You could get rid of a little bit of tangential spam or bombs, but overall, it wasn't necessarily that strong at keeping your sentry gun that safe. So in the Blue Moon update, Valve added its alternate fire, and allows you to mercilessly flashbang people, as if you worked at a SWAT team daycare. The alternate fire of the Short Circuit made the weapon much better at doing the job it was trying to do, and also gave it more utility in more situations. You can now use the Short Circuit to help your team get through tight chokes, use it to try to deny some area spam, use it to be able to clean up a huge number of bombs that are going towards your nest, or just use it to blind people because that's really funny. Now, unfortunately, this update also made it so that the Short Circuit can be used to make Dust Bowl playable, which means more people will play Dust Bowl, but aside from this grievous sin, the changes were overall really good for the Short Circuit, and now, in casual play at least, it's a very viable secondary weapon. It's a little annoying, but it's better than it being completely useless. And of course, when it comes to the health of the arsenal, this can be done in both ways. You can also use reworking to turn weapons that are poorly designed but really efficient into something that's better for the game. For example, the Diamondback. The Diamondback is wholly overpowered. And that's not something I would say of most weapons in Team Fortress 2. The Diamondback is not only overpowered for competitive settings, it's also really powerful in a casual one. to the point where I would say that it's obnoxious. But it's not just a matter of changing numbers with the Diamondback, because if you wanted to simply nerf the Diamondback and make it less egregious, doing so would obviously be very easy. For those of you who are unaware, the Diamondback is a revolver that awards the spy with crits for every backstab and sapped building he gets. So you backstab someone, you get some crits. Pretty simple. Now you might be asking, well, what's so wrong with that? Well, the problem is that when the Diamondback has crits, it deals 102 damage. More damage than a demo man's grenade launcher with a direct hit, on a hit scan weapon. Meaning that even over long or medium distances, the spy can two-shot a soldier without any overheal, and anything underneath of him. Additionally, the spy can disguise and go invisible, meaning that the spy is capable of hiding the fact that he even has the crits at all, which means that you could see a spy who's disguised, go to engage him, and not be capable of even knowing that he has the crits, and therefore not capable of counterplaying that fact whatsoever, unlike every other revolver. This is unlike, say, the Ambassador, which the spy can also hide through disguises, but since the Ambassador is a constant, it can always deal 102 damage on a close-range headshot, you can compensate for that possibility by just assuming the spy always has it, and therefore moving erratically to make it harder for the spy to hit the headshots he needs. Additionally, the Ambassador has to hit a headshot to get that kind of damage, and has to be very close to be able to do the full 102. The Diamondback can hit 102 without hitting a headshot, and doesn't necessarily need to be done at close range, meaning that the spy could go somewhere where no one's even aware of his position, two-tap your medic or your engineer or something, and then return to the shadows. And that's an incredibly powerful thing to be able to do with 102 damage. Now, you could fix this by just, say, making it so that the Diamondback gets mini crits, but that would make the weapon almost useless, because the Diamondback with mini crits barely does any more damage than a stock revolver. This is why the weapon is kind of just poorly designed. It's either really, really good, or not at all. Changing it to mini crits, which would be basically the closest analogous to the current design while also being worse, would only give the revolver a 12% increase over stock after a backstab, which is just not very good at all. There's just not really a way to make this good without making it too good purely through changing the numbers. So why not remake it? I mean, there's plenty of things you can do to Spy other than just rewarding him even more for his backstabs, like every Spy weapon does. And while I don't know what that answer is right now, there is one. And we could rework this weapon to find that answer, and all we would lose is the Diamondback. So basically, nothing. And there are plenty of other bad designs that they could do this to. The Razorback, which is neither effective nor interesting, most heavy melees, the Cleaner's Carbine. Sure, you can add a weapon to an existing slot, you can change a weapon to use a new set of animations, but there's still plenty that you can do to tackle weapons that are either not effective, not fun, or are too good. Annoying comes from all angles. Trying to patch the holes by adding new weapons that fix up pseudo-subclasses, provide worse matchups for existing problematic weapons, or just try something new on their own is not really an efficient way of doing things. You've got plenty of choices you can make for weapons that you could redo, and lots of different baselines and influences for design. You can do anything with a new weapon, but you can do basically anything with the vast number of weapons that need to be reworked in Team Fortress 2. And I don't know if you noticed, but we have a lot of fucking weapons in this game. 45 quintillion, and sometimes that could make it a little difficult to perfectly read the situation that you're being faced with, and obviously the more weapons you add, the worse that gets. Team Fortress 2 is really good with readability. I think part of the reason why Team Fortress 2 is so readable to begin with is because so many of the weapons we use aren't that good, and aren't really used, so you don't have to worry about them. And again, I think it would just be overall better for the game's health to fix up a lot of these old decrepit weapons and make them viable, rather than adding new weapons on top of an existing pile of weapons that no one's using. We've got 160 of these things, we don't need 165 if half of them aren't good. Now there are some limitations to what's possible through reworking. Obviously, by definition, you can't add new weapons when you're just reworking old ones. So for slots that are relatively underdeveloped, like the Spy's Sapper slot, you obviously can't add something new to that to help beef up the number of options that Spy has. But still, you're not very limited in what you're capable of doing when you're reworking weapons. There's a lot of work that can be done. And considering the kinds of resources Valve is willing to commit to Team Fortress 2, I think this is the more realistic and just the better option. Now, there is an argument to be made that if you change around certain weapons and you make them function differently, then you're going to alienate the people who use those weapons and like them for what they do. But you could say the same for any change you make to the game. There's no appeasing everybody. That's why to be a truly powerful internet goblin, you have to pick one group of people and just attack them ceaselessly, which is why Belgians are no longer welcome on this channel. And while you're definitely going to piss someone off by buffing or reworking or nerfing a weapon, there's also going to be an amount of people that you make happier by doing so. There's a lot of fans of a lot of weapons that just don't like where their weapon is right now because it's either not effective, is too effective, or is just poorly designed. I know for instance that Babyface's blaster is one particular fan favorite weapon that a lot of people are just kind of middling on right now because it's not very good at the job it's trying to do, simply because losing its charge is too easy. And in the same vein, there's a lot of people, myself included, who don't like stuff like the Scorch Shot, because that weapon is annoying and too effective and too easy to use. And there's also a lot of weapons that have absolutely no fans that I think literally everyone would be okay with reworking, like the Gas Passer. Nobody unironically likes the Gas Passer, they like it as a joke, so why not remake it into something that isn't just a joke? Same with the Sun on the Stick, the Hulong Heater, the Thompson, etc. We'd be better off fixing all of these weapons that people already own and therefore don't have to buy or trade for new versions of, than just gambling on adding new weapons. The fans of these weapons deserve to be able to use them effectively, and to have all of their favorite weapons be in a good state, rather than adding new ones. Now, you might be hearing some noises right now. That would be the ghoul attacking my door that Valve has sent after me for saying that we shouldn't be buying new weapons and should be repurposing old things that the community already owns, and therefore does not need to give Valve money for. Now, you might find yourself in a similar situation if you're a Team Fortress 2 or a CSGO player or a Dota 2 player or whatever. If you enjoy Valve products in general, they typically do this kind of thing. So watch carefully as I showcase the proper way to dispatch of such a creature. It requires a little bit of finesse, I know, but it's effective. But yes, that's another good point about reworking old weapons is that people already own them, and they own war paints and skins for them, and Strangifiers and festive versions and whatever else. The game is already apparently incapable of making an Australian for every weapon, a festive for every weapon, a strange for every weapon, so why go around adding new ones that are probably just going to be given the same treatment? I mean, how long has the Righteous Bison been actually dysfunctional? We shouldn't really be talking about adding new weapons when there's so many that aren't good, aren't working, or aren't completed. When we all know damn well that if Valve were to add new weapons, they would probably be subject to the same fate. And I basically just submit this to the community for consideration. I know that new weapons are shiny and exciting, but there are so many weapons in Team Fortress 2 that have been neglected that maybe we should consider giving them some love first, which I think is a position Valve would be way more down to consider than adding new weapons outright. As sad as it is, the web of new cosmetic alterations to different weapons has made adding new ones kind of obnoxious on their end, even if it wouldn't really be that much work and they have a lot of community labor that they could take advantage of. And frankly, if Valve were willing to meet us all in the middle and rework or balance some weapons again, that would be just fine by me. I'm already pretty excited about getting a new map that won't just go away after the holidays. I know Valve's pretty sensitive to this kind of stuff, but if they are listening, which they're not, I think it would be a good idea. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time, when we will be talking about probably another Team Fortress character or something, or maybe Elden Ring. See ya.